Okay. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Shanita Williams. I'm so excited to have some time today to talk with my family about my upcoming book, Feedback Mentality. This book really is designed to give people an honest look at the feedback experience. We've been getting feedback our entire lives, but most people actually haven't been trained on how to handle it correctly. So this feedback book gives you tips on how to deliver feedback, how to receive it well, but also how do you process it when people leave you with their feedback and you're with your own personal narrative of what you believe of yourself. We're also going to talk about the how to apply feedback, and then how do you do it, like right now during COVID? How do you send feedback in a remote setting? So I'm excited about the book because I believe it is truly the key to unlocking and unleashing our potential. I believe that all of our potential is held within our mind, and this book is going to walk you through how do you examine your thoughts so that you can truly live the life that you want to live. So, with that, I have my amazing family with me to have a candid conversation really about the book. I'm going to answer their questions and just have a good time spending time with my family. So, with that, I'd like to welcome my family. Hi, family.
Hi.
So glad to have you guys here from across the nation.
Hello.
To have this conversation. So now I'm just going to turn it over to our family and just see what kind of questions do you guys have about the upcoming book?
So I'd like to ask, what inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, it's a great question. When I think about this book, it actually started over the course of my life. I didn't realize I was writing a book, but I was collecting information along the way. And it was through these daily experiences at work and my personal life that I realized that I needed to pull all this information together. So, when you think about your entire life, we get information from people everywhere. And I actually thought I was really, really good at handling the influx of information that was coming towards me. I've been working in higher education and in leadership roles for the last 15 years, and I saw how important feedback was to people. And so I thought I was actually really good at it until one day I realized I actually needed more work on myself than I thought I did. And I had a moment where I was actually really overwhelmed by some feedback. I actually started doubting my abilities, doubting my self worth, and I realized that there must be another step that I need to take in order to really get myself positioned for success. So I started examining my thoughts, and I realized that I actually wasn't really good at processing the information that people gave me. Because while it was feedback and just suggestions on how to get better, sometimes I sat alone and thought I actually wasn't, a good person, or I was actually not really worthy of the position I was in, or that I was an imposter and not competent enough to do some things. Now, of course, I know where I am today that narrative was absolutely false. But I had to walk myself through that experience in order to figure that out. And so I said, I have to share this with the world. I can't keep this to myself, because I realized I wasn't the only person struggling with handling feedback. And as a leader who really helped onboard and welcome people to the organization, I realized that people were also feeling a little insecure or nervous when they started new jobs, or when they changed roles, or if they changed careers. And so I wanted to provide this information to folks so that they could really be more conscious of the internal narrative we have in the world, and hopefully unlock a new pathway for them that reduce their stress when it comes to feedback. So that's what inspired me to write the book. Want to pay it forward to the rest of the world and hopefully help somebody else.
I love that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. Cool. So I'd like to ask, now that the book is out, it's tangible, it's coming up for sale here pretty soon. What are your top 3 things that you're hoping that your readers will get out of purchasing your book?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I hope and I pray that, one, it just brings awareness. I think we've been getting feedback our whole lives and we don't pay attention to it. So one is just awareness. I want people to move the feedback experience from a subconscious experience to a more conscious experience so that they're aware of it. I also want people to feel empowered. I want them to read this book and go, wow, I can take control of my destiny. Like no one else can determine whether or not I'm going to be successful. I can do it for myself. So I hope people read it and go, yes, like take their power back and say, I'm going on to the goal and the dreams that I have for myself. And then the third thing I hope people get from this book is just skills, because I think it's one thing to be inspired, but you also have to have the practical skills to get there. And so I hope that when they read this book, they feel like they have the skills on how to receive it well, how to deliver it well, how to process it well, and then how do you apply it to get to the place that you want to be. So those are my goals for the book.
That's great, Shanita.
Yeah. Thank you. What else?
Oh, I guess I'll go ahead.
I can do my. Oh, go ahead. You sure, Tish?
Mm-hmm.
You answered mine's, I think, already, but I'm gonna give it to you anyway. Do you feel that people needed some direction in their future with their decisions?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. I do believe that. I believe that, I mean, if you think about it, when we're born, sometimes, I mean, we have a tendency to look up, right? As kids, we look to our parents for direction. As students, we look to our teachers for direction. As, even in the church, you look to the pastor for direction. If you are on a sports team, you look to the coach for direction. And I think for me, there comes a time and place where you have to be able to look to yourself, right? There comes a time when you have to be able to say, I know I have all the information from my teacher, from my parent, from my pastor, from my coach. Take all of that information and then you feel like you can make the decision for yourself. And so I noticed that. I noticed that in the workplace, even my own children, people are always asking for permission or wanting somebody else to validate their steps or tell them they did a good job or tell them, yes, I think you can be a doctor, or yes, I believe you can get a promotion, or yes, when I think it's important for people to be able to look around them and make their own decision, be able to look around and look at their life and say, no, I believe I am capable, without looking to the world to validate you. And so for me, yes, I believe that this book was really part of that storytelling around, here's a tool for you to make an informed decision about your life. Because when your coach is gone and your friends are gone, you're only left with yourself. And you have to have the confidence to be able to make the right decision for you. Because sometimes I think we live for other people. Have you guys ever found, I don't know, when you think about the decisions we make, sometimes you feel like you're doing it for other people.
I feel like that's, I agree. I feel like that's the age we live in right now, especially with like social media, like in my age group. I feel like we always looking kind of for validation to kind of see like where we're at in life, like, are we going on the right path? Are we doing the right thing? Are the decisions that we're making, we ask for that validation from outside rather than within. So
you're so right.
Especially, sorry, Shanita, that's especially important if they're your role model or somebody that you look up to, or even a higher up, being a manager or somebody. Did I do good? Did I do good? You're looking for that yes, but if you don't get that yes that you're looking for, it may, take you back a little bit into your shell because you didn't get the answer that you were looking for. Although you thought you were doing a great job, they may see things a little bit differently, but they're putting that perception on you. And then you're taking that to heart because that's somebody that you look to, for that validation. So good point.
What's nice about this book is we always look for yes, and you always want the yes. But what happens with that critical conversation when you're getting a feedback that you don't want? And that's what I like about Shanita's book, because feedback is about growth and development. And as a leader, and I'm thanking Shanita for this book, and that's going to lead into my next question, because I've been in management for many years as well, and in a leadership role. And I have to give constructive feedback. And that's what it is. It's constructive feedback. It's not negative. It's in how you're going to improve to be better at what you do. And so how do you recommend I introduce your book to my team? Because I do want to do a coaching around your book.
Oh, that's a great question. Well, first, hats off to you, because I think people aren't having honest conversations about the feedback experience. So I think the best way to introduce this to your team is just to say, hey, I know there's a whole experience around feedback that we haven't talked about. Would you guys like to go on a journey to exploring it? And I think having that conversation just makes people feel comfortable, because especially because you're in a position of authority, everyone, as Tamika mentioned, gets a little nervous because they look up to you. But when you're able to model to them, and I think be vulnerable too, and say, hey, like, I'm still growing at this too. I'm reading this book to develop my skills. This isn't just about you, but I'm trying to get better. I think that creates what I call trust equity. And I talk a little bit about that in the book. We need trust equity. I need to know if you're going to give me feedback and I'm going to give you feedback, equity in a house, right? You pay into that every time you pay that mortgage, right? You're paying equity in the value of your home, right? Like you're retaining that equity. We have to do that in our relationships, where we invest in each other and we build in that trust equity together, because then I can say almost anything to you. If we have that trust, we have that trusting relationship, you won't have to question my motives. You'll know that, hey, to your point, Auntie, I'm here to help develop you. And they don't have to question if you're trying to make fun of them or put them down or degrade them or disrespect them. They know when you give them feedback, it's actually because I want to grow you. I'm invested in you. I want to support you. And so I think the best way to introduce it is to say, hey, I'm working on myself. Would you guys like to join the journey? And actually, I have some cool, like, open-ended questions, little survey questions you can ask your team to start the conversation too, to say, have you ever been nervous, when receiving feedback? And then sharing your own stories might really help. I actually did a survey to my network and I asked that same question. I asked, have you ever felt sad or depressed or even cried after receiving feedback? And 70% of the folks who answered my survey said yes. Wow. So that told me that this is a real thing. While they may smile, we may smile in front of each other and go, oh, thank you for the feedback. People go home, they go home, they drive their car home and they're thinking about it, playing it over and over again. Has that happened to any of you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, me a few times. And so I think that's the part that I think is most critical, is understanding that feedback isn't just a bit of information that you say to someone. It's what they hold on to, which is also really powerful. So
Shanita, and I'm gonna let them ask their question next. But since we're on this path of talking about leadership roles in your book, do your book describe constructive feedback versus negative feedback? And the reason why I ask that is because when you talked about just now riding home feeling really bad, I had a boss who was, it was a nightmare. And I felt the 2 years I worked with her feedback was never constructive. It was always negative. I felt she was degrading me, and my self-esteem was really bad and low, and you cry all the time because you think no matter what you do, it's never good, and you're questioning your ability to be this leader, Do your book talk about how to handle situation of that nature?
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for bringing that up. My book talks about the difference between constructive and destructive feedback. Destructive feedback is when you make it about the person. Constructive feedback is when you make it about the behavior, right? So when you are giving somebody feedback and you're talking about, you're not good enough, you're not smart, I can't believe you did that, that is destructive. You are trying to break someone down. And I am sad to hear that you had that experience, but I want you to know you're not alone, because I've had that experience of someone who couldn't focus on the behavior. They tried to focus on my character. And that is not feedback. That's not constructive. So yes, I actually provide some examples of that in there. And really give people a warning, because I try to share some real honest stories with people to let them know that, to give them an example, because I think some people don't even know the difference. Some people think they're a great leader or a good friend. I'm a good friend because I told her she looks a hot mess. I told her, well, you're now talking about her character. You're not talking about, let me talk about how to organize color patterns and you're calling me in essence a hot mess, like me or whatever. And I heard a teacher say, actually, sorry, a coach say, you guys are all a hot mess. And I was like, how are people internalizing that? Because it feels like it's attacking their character, right? Versus, hey, you guys, we're not focused. That's different. So I have a few examples in the book, and really what I say in the book is a forewarning. The Bible says there's death and life in the tongue, and I challenge people to speak life, to speak positivity, to focus on the behavior and not the person, and give feedback that's going to be a stepping stone and not throwing stones. There's a difference between me putting a stone in front of you so you can step on it and move forward in your life versus me throwing a stone at you just to hurt you, And so those are kind of the examples I provide in there to help people understand that there's a fine line. And if you step over it and you're tossing stones and you're focused on the past and not the future. That's the other thing I talk about. We can't belabor the past. You want to keep talking about what I did 15 years ago. That's not helping me get better, right? Let's focus on the future. I mean, how many of you have had people who still talk about what you did 10 years ago or mistake you made, right? That's happened, right? And that's destructive. That's not helping me move forward. So how do we focus on the future? By saying, here's what I see for you. Here's what I think can be done. We don't have to replay the mistakes I made over and over and over again, right? But that takes work and it takes intentionality. And that's why I hope by sharing this, people get some ahas and go, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that. And they can quickly make that conscious decision to change. So
yeah, that's right. Thank you.
Yeah. So Shanita, what would you say is the most significant chapter in the book then?
So the most significant chapter, let's see. So I love them all, but the one that I think is probably the most significant is the processing feedback chapter. There's a quote that I have in there that says, be careful what you say to yourself because you're listening. I mean, think about that. Be careful what you say to yourself because you're listening. I think we are our worst critic. I know it. I beat myself up more than anybody else in the world. I beat myself up. I can look at something and I can make it mean a whole different thing. And someone else is like, I didn't say that, but in my mind, I can internalize it differently. I think we all do that. So that chapter to me is powerful because I think that chapter is something we don't talk a lot about. I think we talk a lot about delivering feedback. So you're going to see my book. I'm going to talk about how to deliver it. And there's a lot of books out there about that. There's books out there on how to receive it, and so you'll hear me talk about that. But this chapter, processing feedback, I have not seen a lot out there on what is your feedback you're giving yourself. That's what this chapter is about. It's about, hey, what are the things you tell yourself? What are the things you're holding on to? We talked about other people holding on to your mistakes. Are you holding on to your mistakes? I'm so bad at it. My supervisor had to tell me I made a mistake one day. It was a little mistake, but I was so annoyed that I made the mistake. I kept talking about it. Like I just kept talking. Yeah, remember last week when and she looked at me and was like, Shanita, let it go. Like she was like, okay. Shanita,
I've done that.
She was like, that was last week. Why are you still? She didn't even bring it up. It was me. I was like, yeah, remember when I said so-and-so? I can't believe I said that. And she was like, you don't got to beat yourself up every time you see me. Like, we're good. And that, I think, really sparked something in me because, you can get really depressed. You can get really sad when you play over a negative incident over and over and over again. So I learned about the brain. I actually had a chance back in 2010 to study in San Francisco, actually at SE Systems, and learn a little bit about the neuroscience of the brain. And what I learned is our brains cannot tell the difference between a real threat, like a snake in front of you, or a threat to your ego. So think about that. Your brain cannot tell the difference between real physical harm in front of you or perceived physical harm. So when you keep playing over a hurt, your brain is thinking someone is really hurting you right now. Does that make sense? When you replay that time you got hurt from that boyfriend or that boss or that bestie that you thought was your bestie for life, and all of a sudden, you know, when you replay those memories, all of that comes flooding back and your brain thinks it's happening right now. So that means your stress is going up physically. You actually will have higher blood pressure. You know, you have anxiety. All those feelings are happening because your brain thinks it's happening to you right now. And so if you can't get control of that mental narrative, you know, for me, it's also connected to our health. You know, you see some people who go into depression, you know, who have manifestation of illness because we are in our heads. Rumination is actually an illness. You know, the American Psychological Association said rumination is actually something. It is defined, you know, as playing over these hurtful memories over and over again. And that's something I do. I play it over and over because I'm trying to get better. But when you ruminate, you can't get to solutions because you're just playing over the hurt over and over again. So that's why, you know, Tish, you asked me, what's the most impactful chapter? Processing feedback is. And if we can master what we tell ourselves, then it doesn't matter what the rest of the world says, because it can come to you, but you don't hold on to it. And so I call that in my book, I call it the strainer versus the sponge mentality. So think about that. A sponge soaks everything in, right? And holds on to it. We've been told our whole lives to what? Be a sponge. No matter where you go. Be a sponge, be a sponge. And if you think about a sponge, you guys, like really think about this. How often should we change our sponges out of our sink? You should be changing those very, very often.
Yeah.
Guess what? If you don't, they start to smell, deteriorate, hold on to bacteria.
Yeah.
Right? So here's the thing. Why are we being a sponge with our mind? We're holding on to old thoughts, old feelings, old pain, and it's sitting there deteriorating, bacteria being toxic in our thinking. So that's why I say in the book, I say we should move away from being a sponge. We don't want to hold on to everybody's feedback. I don't want to hold on to the bully who told me I was too skinny, you look like a crackhead, and I don't want you can't hold on to all of those memories. But what you can do in the book, I talk about being a sponge or being a strainer, because you know, a strainer, right? Like when you're cooking with a strainer, everything goes in, but everything doesn't get to stay, right? So this is, for me, it's about an intentional approach to saying, like, I hear you, I'm gonna hear everything, but I'm going to pick and choose what gets to stay with me. I'm not going to be a sponge and just hold on to anything I come into contact with. So I hope people get something from that by itself, because I love that was transforming for me. So
excellent. That's an excellent.
I love that. Yeah. Yes.
I like that.
Yeah. Definitely feel like I'm going to get help from that chapter for sure.
Right. So since you actually mentioned the sponge strainer mentality, we all know, that you are also a TEDx speaker. You have spoken on the TEDx stage. Does your book relate to your TED Talk as well? Do you correlate the two?
Yeah, absolutely. So TEDx, for those of you who don't know, is it's an amazing platform where people get to share unique ideas that they believe are worth spreading. And I had the honor back in 2018 to step on the TEDx stage and to share 12 minutes on an idea that I thought was unique. And it actually was the processing feedback one, because I felt like most people hadn't really talked about it. And so you will see a strong correlation between what you saw in my TEDx talk to the book. It reiterates a lot of those things as well as expands on it. But I think it's a great way, maybe before you read the processing feedback chapter, maybe watch the TED Talk very quickly. It's called Processing Feedback with a Strainer, Not a Sponge, so you can look it up. And it's a nice precursor to kind of getting you mentally ready for this chapter, because it's a little different than what you'll probably used to when you think about feedback, but I think it's well worth it. So thank you.
You came to Sacramento and you did a workshop on how to deal with constructive feedback.
Yep.
And a lot of people that attended that workshop were saying that someone was my supervisors and someone was a coworker, and they said, I learned how to now I understand how to deal with my husband better, because they were doing negative. They was thinking of him negative instead of, but about the brain, you were talking about the brain. Do you mention any of the things that you talked about at the workshop in your book?
Yes, that's a great question. I remember that workshop and that feedback too, that a few folks gave and said, wow, I'm going to look at my relationships in a completely different way. So yes, I do touch on a lot of the things that I shared at that workshop. I don't go into a lot on the neuroscience of the brain, which is probably going to be in book number 2, because I wanted to make it a very simple read that can kind of get, whet the appetite for it. But yeah, I definitely will have a chapter or a book number 2 where I really go into the neuroscience and really understanding, the 3 parts of the brain and how they primarily function. So looking at the primitive brain, the emotional brain, the logical brain, and how they all work together in this feedback space. So that will be coming soon. Great question.
I guess that just goes to my question. Did you learn anything about yourself while writing this book?
Good question.
Whoa. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Taylor, that's an excellent question. I learned something about myself every single day. I'm very, very reflective. And so I actually have a journal where I try to just capture at work, like, oh, here's what I learned, because I'm actually trying a lot of new things at work. And so I've been trying to capture that. And because I was writing the book, I think the book really helped illuminate for me where some of my vulnerabilities were. And I think, quite honestly, I wrote the book for myself. I think the book helped me become stronger in my thought process, helped me get stronger at even delivering better feedback, being more conscious of my words, what I say to other people. I want people to always feel like when I meet with them that I see their potential. And so it made me more conscious, quite honestly, of like my speech, my behavior. It actually made me praise people more and give more positive recognition, because I talk about that in the book. And while I was writing it, it made me think about, well, Shanita, how often are you doing it? Are you taking advantage of those moments to build people up instead of focusing on all the things that they can get better at? People are doing great things every day. Like, stop and smell the roses and give people, what they say, give people their roses while the blood is running warm in their veins. I challenged myself to do more of that. So absolutely. I also found that, I'll be honest with you, the book is called Feedback Mentality. And it's about, being strong with feedback. I'm quite nervous. The book is about to be in the world's hands. And I know that means I'm going to get a lot of unsolicited feedback. And so once I actually submitted my manuscript, one of the things I learned, Taylor, was that a feedback mentality doesn't mean that you're perfect. It doesn't mean that you can always handle feedback and that you're resilient and perfect at handling it. It just means that you're aware that you're going to work on it. And so I think that came to huge awareness for me as soon as I submitted that manuscript, and I saw myself get really nervous, like, oh my gosh, this is going to go into print. It's going to go into people's hands. And I had to ask myself, oh, why are you getting nervous? You're afraid of feedback, And I said, yes, I am, but it isn't that. I won't say I'm afraid of feedback. I'm nervous because you just don't know what people will say, right? People can say anything they want. And kind of to Auntie Nunu's point, sometimes it's destructive feedback. But what I've learned about myself is that, I'm on the road to living out my full potential because I didn't let any of that feedback stop me. Any of those fears, any of that nervousness, I feel like I am trying to live exactly what my book is saying, and that we can't let our internal fears or our narrative or what other people may believe about who we are say whether or not I'm good enough to publish a book. And I think that's why it took me so long to publish, because I was like, well, who am I to publish? And no one's going to read it. And I'm not really anybody special. Again, that internal narrative. And I had to flip it and say, well, why wouldn't they want to read this book? And I'm special.
Right.
That's how I am. And once I was able to turn that around, the writing became much easier, and the process became much more enjoyable. So I learned a ton about myself. And I tell you, I'm learning a lot about myself every day. Now that it's on pre-sale, and I'm also learning that I have a community of people around me I didn't know I had, and that people are rallying for me. And that's also good to uncover too in this process. So
That's
I have
wonderful.
a quick question. So you are a mom, you work a full-time job, you're a wife, so you have other activity things that you're doing. So,
yeah.
But how do you have the time to write the book? When do you have the time to write the book? For other people that want to write, so can you give an advice of what do you do?
Oh, yeah. That's a good question for my husband, because Kevin is like, and even the kids, they've seen this journey of me, stealing away and trying to get some time. So I'll tell you this. The way I approach the book is I actually didn't start it off as a book. Kind of like I shared with you guys earlier, it started off with me just learning and picking things up along the way. So I actually started writing articles first. So they started off as very short little articles, 1,000 words. And I started building my confidence from just writing short articles, publishing on LinkedIn, publishing in some online articles, and doing a TED Talk. And so getting my feet wet and starting small, starting with the whole book for me was overwhelming. I just wrote my dissertation 5 years ago, actually 2 years before that. So before I started. So, and that was over 100 pages. And I swore to myself I wasn't going to write again after that, because it was so long. That took 7 years to do. And so this took 3 years of me just starting small, writing little articles, writing in my journal, pulling out Microsoft Word, keeping one document running where I didn't constrict myself at all. And I just, whenever I had an idea, I just kind of write it down. I had voice recorder. Whenever I had an idea, I'd try to record. I wasn't really organized with it initially. And then finally I realized, wow, I think I have something here. I did reach out to a publisher about 2 years ago. So I had only wrote for a year. And so I had about what I thought was a manuscript ready. I sent it to a publisher and he gave me some feedback. He actually was the owner of this book company. And he offered me an opportunity to have a one-on-one with him. He said, hey, I see your manuscript. You have some good things here, but I want to give you some feedback, which was perfect because the book is about feedback. So I met with this publisher who hadn't known me, but he read all of my articles together, and he gave me some feedback and said, hey, how about you just, because he said, you're a good speaker. Why don't you try speaking? Why don't you try writing longer articles? And he gave me some suggestions to think about. And it's funny, 2 years after that, I sent him an email, actually sent him my TED Talk and said, guess what, I'm speaking. And he was just so proud of that. And then I said, now I have a full manuscript, over 30,000 words. I think my first one was only maybe, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words. It was less than 10,000. And he said, you got more to do in order for it to be a book. And so it eventually graduated to over 30,000 words, which is now this book. So just a little bit at a time. And even when the kids were asleep, I tried to find some time after work. I never did it during my work day at all. It was as soon as I got off of work, carve out some time with the family, kids went to sleep. And then I tried to get online for as much as I could to chip away at it. As we came to the winding down of this, Kevin was amazing. My husband, I'll tell you that this book wouldn't have made it to print had he not nudged me and said, Shanita, like, go upstairs, go work on it, go do at least an hour, go ahead, I got the kids, I have dinner. So a lot of teamwork, honestly, to make this happen. And in the final push, I finally took a whole week off of work just to be in the book, to finalize and bring everything together, because everything was disjointed. And so just invested in myself a little bit, made sure I balanced the time for family, but took some time to give me the space I needed to create. So whatever works for you, I found there's no magic formula on how to do it.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shanita, because you do. It's just when you're persistent, you just have to find the time to do it. And I know you're a VP, senior VP or VP?
Associate Vice President.
Associate Vice President. So I know it's no time at work to try to carve out do nothing when you're in a leadership role. So we're winding down to the end of our session. And I have a question related to the book. I know you spent a lot of time figuring out your cover and what do you want on it? How did it come? How did you decide to select that cover for your book?
Yeah. So the cover, so here is the book. You guys can see here. The cover was intentionally designed, and I have to give lots of credit to my husband, my husband on this. So, you know, this book is really, you probably have gotten the essence of it now. This book is all about the power of the mind. So we definitely knew we wanted a strong image that really centered people on the mentality part, that, you know, everything you, what do they say? Whether you think you can or think you cannot, either way, you're right. So for me, everything begins and ends in the mind. So we really wanted to center on that. And we also, we put the key there and really wanted that keyhole to be in the mind, because if you think about it, our whole body, everything we do starts in the epicenter of our brain, right? Our thoughts, our emotions, our feelings, our behaviors. Our arms do not move unless our brain tells it to do so. So our purpose, our passion, the dream and the seed that God planted in each and every one of us cannot manifest itself until we unlock it here. We have to believe in him. We have to believe he has a plan and a purpose for us. And so once you believe that, and they can take control of your narrative, then you can live out the plans that God has for you. So we really wanted to have a cover that focused on that brain, a key to let people know that no one else has the key to your life. Your family doesn't have the key to your life. Your spouse doesn't have the key to your life. Your children, that boss, no one has the key to you living your best life, that you hold it. And it is right here in the moment you're able to recognize that, you then have the power to unlock and unleash your future. It's all about you recognizing that. So that was the cover. We went through three versions, three versions of it. The first version, people loved. It didn't sit well. And it had like words in the brain, and we were like, and it had a ladder going up the brain, and we were like, The second version, we changed the color from a very, very light blue to this very royal blue with this gold picture, and it had like a lock over the top of the head, and people were like, why is that coming out of the head? So we landed here, went with this almost Tiffany blue, still powerful gold, and we're very happy with where it landed. Kevin, my husband, is the visionary behind that. So if you like the cover, you got to make sure you tell him.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Cover the question.
Okay.
Good. Any final question?
I do. I have a question. So with the climax of how the world is right now, and everybody being at home, and just like, you know, everybody being more vocal, especially about like mental health and stuff right now, why do you feel like this book is important for people to actually, you know, obtain and go get and have at this moment?
Yeah, that's a really great question. You know, it's funny because 3 years ago when I started this book, I didn't know the timing, right? I didn't know the release date. I didn't know what would be happening in the world at that time. But the more I look at this book, the more I reread this book, I realize that God has designed it to happen at this time. You know, we're at home. A lot of us are alone, and you are alone with your thoughts more than we ever have been before. Before we had the world to distract us, we could go out shopping all day, and we could go run and play sports, and we could be at school all day, and we could be at work talking and laughing to people all day. And we were honestly distracted. It was easy to distract yourself. But now this nation is at home. We are at home with our thoughts, having to confront our own feelings, our own beliefs. And I think right now, we do see higher instances of isolation, depression, right? Mental wellness is really at risk just because we are no longer co-located, connection is not there. And here's the thing, there are a few reasons why I think this book is timely. Because we're social creatures, we naturally want to connect with people. Think about this. I've had friendships that have ended in my lifetime because I didn't see them. Think about that. Oh, I don't see you anymore, so we must not be friends. We don't see people right now. We are at risk of people sitting with their thoughts of, she doesn't call me anymore, he doesn't call me anymore, we don't see each other anymore. And it's actually impacting and creating a narrative about relationships, right? So I feel like relationships are at risk. I feel like our own relationship with ourselves are at risk because you're at home and you can't get that validation we were talking about before. Before you would walk into your office and people be like, hey girl, you look cute, or hey, how's it going? Or you get to see your family every Sunday or whatever that is. You don't have that anymore. And so now, if you don't have that validation that has been filling you up, where are you going to get that from? You need to get it from yourself, but you got to have the skills to do that. Because if you are sitting with your thoughts and maybe you've had experiences that were maybe more negative, and so you're having to confront, maybe I'm not good enough, right? We want to make sure that people have the skills to examine that personal narrative when other people can't help you with it. Because when you were sitting at your desk, or if you were sitting in the church pew to someone and you can lean over and go, hey, are you okay, girl? Are you okay? Your friends and family were able to pick up on that because you were right next to each other. But now, you're by yourself and people don't necessarily see you when you're not having a great day and you need to pick me up. And so you have to have the skills today more than ever to really be able to take control of what thoughts are floating around in your mind and figure out how to discharge the ones that cause you stress, anxiety, worry, doubt, fear, so that you can continue to thrive in the world and not shrink, right? Because I think that's what I've seen people do. They start to shrink when they feel that they are not worthy, whatever that standard of worthy is. We all have our own standard. But that's why I think this is a timely book. And I think with the social unrest in the world today, we are getting a lot of messages from people. We are getting a lot of messages about who we are as Black women, as a Black race, right? As people of color, as females in this world. I mean, there is no shortage of information and feedback about who the world thinks we should be. We have to make sure that we are thoughtful about what messages we're letting in and what messages we're letting go. So today, more than ever, I think we all got to work on our feedback mentality. I'm going to keep working on it. Even though this book is done, doesn't mean I'm not done. I still have work to do as well. So
that's
awesome.
Great. Yay.
How many chapters? How many chapters do you have?
We got 10 chapters.
Nice.
Nine chapters.
Are they all hardcover?
Huh?
Are they all hardcover?
You can get a book that's hardcover, or you can get an ebook version as well. I'm going to be working on an audiobook too.
Oh, yay!
That's great. Okay, so I'm going to end us with a final question.
Okay.
So, Miss Shanita, what's next? What's in store next for you in terms of, what's your thought on your next book?
Yeah. So I've been thinking a lot about current state actually, and thinking about how feedback actually shows up by race and gender. I've just started some research. Some of the early research I'll share with you is that we know that statistics show that CEOs are typically what? Female or male? What do you guys guess?
Male.
Yep,
Male.
CEOs are typically male, and they're typically white male. And based on my research, it says that male CEOs are more comfortable providing white males with feedback because they have an affinity bias. They're comfortable, right? And that means women actually, based on this study I read, women were actually receiving vague feedback and not specific feedback. So studies show that men are typically getting specific feedback so that they can move their career forward, and women are given very vague feedback and we have to figure it out. So when you think about moving up in an organization, it's challenging if you don't have specific feedback. So that's what's on the horizon, thinking about a book that looks at, by race, what are the differences in how we receive feedback, exploring microaggressions as well as a form of feedback and how we navigate that. But I'm also coming out with a podcast called Unlock and Unleash, where I'm going to start interviewing people to share their stories of how they've unlocked and unleashed their potential so that they could get a platform to share that and inspire others. So that's what's
awesome.
Nice.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question to the family?
What?
Oh my God.
Tamika, do you have a question?
I actually did have one final question, if you guys don't mind. I just want to ask you really quick, Shanita, because you talk so much about feedback and you did share a little bit of your feedback journey, but I just want to know, prior to writing your book, how receptive were you to receiving feedback versus after writing your book? So I kind of want to see your thought process with before and after, just a quick breakdown.
Yeah. So before writing this book, I was a sponge. I took everybody's feedback. Everybody's feedback was important. I was, Oprah calls it, she says she had a disease to please, and I had that too. I wanted to make everybody happy. So if you wanted this, I'm going to get this for you and get this for you, which meant I was exhausted trying to meet everybody's needs. After doing this book, I'm still a people pleaser. I don't like conflict. I want people to be happy. But I'm very intentional about what I hold on to now. So this book has kind of taken me through a transformation of not just taking everybody's feedback and holding on to it, but being very intentional about what I take and why. So thank you for that.
That was good.
Yep, that was very good. So then my just question is, it's not really a question. Do anybody have anything inspiring or anything they want to say to Shanita? Because this is a big deal. She has a book out.
I'm just very proud. It's like, I'm going to go tell everyone. Yeah.
But Shanita always have been an inspiration even before the book. But when I knew the book was coming out, even when she did her TED Talk, I shared it with everybody. Even my district manager shared it without the whole entire building and the staff development department, okay? And so I recently shared it with the supervisor and said, hey, she's coming out with a book. My daughter coming out with a book. And so she said, oh, what is, no, it was because you do the Friday lives. You do the Friday lives on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, Shanita does a live every Friday about feedback. And she said, oh, I need that, so she's been watching it. So just going out, sharing and telling people about the book and stuff, because we all need to know how to deal with feedback.
Yeah.
So we're very proud. I'm very proud. So.
And Denise, you wrote a book and now your daughter's writing a book, and yours was more religious related book, and hers is more driven, you're in two different sectors, which it's great. I'm excited for Shanita's book because being a manager and in a leadership role, we read these type of books, and it's nice to you know, it's going to be nice to read my niece's book instead of a stranger's book. So I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be great. I'm excited to read it. I think we should do like a book club.
A book club.
We should read the book and then we should come on, like,
And come on and have
questions
questions.
about it, and like
I love it.
what we've added to our life, and that's our
That's great.
Ooh, I love that.
yeah.
Yeah,
I think that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Mhm.
Let's do it.
let's do it.
Yep.
Yeah, Shanita, she is like one of the hardest working people I ever know. Me and her have this running joke. I'm always like, when do you sleep, Batman? Because literally she's always up. I mean, she is always dedicating and trying to protect her craft. So I admire that. I always have. You're a very driven individual. I'm excited to actually see the book come to fruition because I've been fortunate enough to hear little tidbits throughout the process and, you know, give my little bits of feedback if I could say so, but you know, just being able to see how you've gone from the beginning till now, and it's just, this is a big deal and it's huge, and I just wish you all the best of luck with this book, and I hope it touches so many different people because feedback is definitely something. Like when you first brought up the strainer sponge mentality, that was like mind blowing to me because I was like, whoa, we do hold on to a lot of feedback and we do take it to heart. And I've had those experiences as well in various situations just in life. But I think this book touching different people is going to be huge. I mean, not only in the corporate world, but just in life in general. So kudos to you and hats off to you for staying focused and getting the book out.
Yeah, congratulations, Shanita.
Thank you guys so much. Oh, I love my family. I love my family. You guys are so amazing. Thanks for this talk and this time together. I'm so inspired and fueled. Hey, Tish, we got to get the book, the book
club.
yes, the book club schedule. I'm ready.
Yes.
I'm ready.
Yes, we do.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Shanita, for your answers to our questions.
Yes,
This was
thank
great.
you.
I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it. It was great.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
great.